L'Afrique de l'Ouest,
West Africa,
donc, est en deux régions.
is split into two regions at King's Kids level.
Je vais parler de l'Est de l'Afrique de l'Ouest.
And I'm going to
Ça, on
speak
va parler de
to
cette région.
the west part of West Africa, West Africa.
Donc, nous avons les King's Kids dans notre région, au Burkina,
So in our region we have King's Kids in Burkina Faso,
Bénin,
in Benin,
Ghana,
in Ghana,
Togo,
Togo,
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Au niveau King's Kids, le Niger fait partie de notre région.
Niger ne fait pas.
Fait.
And Niger, not Nigeria, but Niger is also part of that region.
Normalement, Niger est Afrique du Nord. Mais
Normally in the YWAM regions, Niger is part of North Africa, but we've absorbed it into our West Africa.
donc, je vais parler spécialement des activités en Côte d'Ivoire et au Togo pour cette région.
So I'm going to speak specifically about what's happening in the Togo and Ivory Coast part of the region.
Togo is this very small one there. Burkina, Benin, Ghana,
Côte d'Ivoire,
I
j'ai
already
oublié.
said. Mali, Niger. Yeah, good.
Non, on est dans notre région.
Okay,
on est
so
dans notre
the
région.
region she's speaking of is Ivory Coast, Burkina, Ghana, Togo, Benin. Bon, Niger, but
Oui,
it's more
c'est
with
bon.
this region.
Donc, nous avons tous eu les nouvelles de la guerre en Côte d'Ivoire,
You've probably all heard the news about the war in the Ivory Coast,
mais les FJ sont restés debout malgré cette guerre.
but the King's Kids there were able to hang in and they're still standing.
Et la force en Côte d'Ivoire,
The strength in the Ivory Coast
c'est l'organisation au niveau des parents.
is that the parents are very involved and very organized.
Ils sont organisés vraiment pour soutenir le ministère.
They're really very well organized for
Ce
supporting
que
the
nous n'avons
ongoing
pas
ministry,
ailleurs.
which is something that we don't really have in our other nations.
Léocadie est la trésorière de l'association des parents FJ.
Leo Caddy, who's with us this week, is actually the treasurer of that organization that the
Et
parents
ça nous
support.
encourage beaucoup.
And that really encourages us in Ivory Coast.
Ils ont repris les activités avec une nouvelle génération.
So after things had kind of slumped during the war, they've restarted activities with a new generation.
Leur défi, c'est de trouver un endroit où se rassembler puisqu'on a tout cassé là où ils étaient avant.
One of their main challenges is to find a place to meet with the young people because where they met before has been all destroyed and broken down.
Donc au Togo,
In Togo,
un petit pays avec un gros ventre,
a
petit
small
pays.
country with a big stomach.
et ce qui nous encourage et nous enthousiasme au Togo, c'est le travail en partenariat.
What encourages us in Togo is our partnership work.
Donc nous travaillons dans la prison pour enfants avec plusieurs missions sur place.
We work in a children's prison with several other organizations that are there in the area.
Nous avons une très bonne relation avec Jeunesse en Mission.
We have a great relationship with the broader YWAM family.
Toutes les écoles de GEM nous invitent à parler d'enfants.
All the YWAM schools, DTSs, invite us to speak about ministry to children.
Et donc les écoles de disciples ont pris quartier libre comme stratégie d'évangélisation.
And so the DTSs are using Quartier Libre and the reaching out children's evangelism as one of their
Et
outreach
quand ils vont à
strategies
un
from the
endroit,
school.
les portes sont ouvertes à travers les enfants pour atteindre les adultes, même dans les milieux animistes et musulmans.
And we find that when we go into different areas, that doors open to us because we're going with children. So that opens doors to reach the parents and the adults as well, even in Muslim areas.
À la dernière FTJ,
During the last PCYM,
les grands chefs de l'église presbytérienne ont visité la base.
one of the high-up leaders of the Presbyterian Church came to visit the base
Et on demandait aux étudiants, qu'est-ce que vous faites?
and we asked the students, what are you doing?
Et les étudiants ont expliqué.
And the students talked about their ministry.
Et ils ont décidé que nous devons former tous les moniteurs sur toute l'étendue du territoire de leur dénomination.
And so they invited us to train all the Sunday school teachers across the country in their denomination.
Nous avons fait une partie l'année passée et nous terminons cette année.
So we did that in part last year and we'll complete that this year.
Guy avait fait un séminaire chez nous une fois
Guy came and did a seminar in Togo once.
et la femme du président est venue à ce séminaire.
And the president's wife came to the seminar.
Elle a acheté tous les CDFJ,
She bought all the King's Kids CDs that we
elle les a
had.
écoutés,
She listened to them.
elle a inscrit ses enfants au FJ.
And she signed her kids up to be part of our King's Kids group.
Partout où nous allons,
Everywhere we go,
le président suit ce que nous faisons.
the president knows what we're up to.
Le mois passé, on a fait un week-end
Last month we had a weekend
et les enfants sont venus.
and his kids came.
Et tout d'un coup, la femme nous appelle. Le papa a dit que le chauffeur doit rester là. Il faut qu'il y ait un véhicule au cas où les enfants ont des problèmes.
And then the president's wife phoned us and said, by the way, just keep the chauffeur there with you. It's important that you guys
Parce
have a
qu'on a
vehicle during your
des
camp.
problèmes et il a peur pour ses enfants. Mais
Because we often have transport problems.
ce
and
qui,
he's
je
a bit
veux
worried
dire,
about
il
his
suit ce que
kids.
ses enfants font, donc il nous suit.
So he's watching what his own kids are doing. In other words, he's watching what we're
Et
doing.
sa femme a fait le camp de Pâques avec nous l'année passée.
The president's wife did the Easter camp with us last year.
Et les enfants lui enseignent à entendre la voix de Dieu.
And his kids have been teaching him how to hear God's voice.
Donc, nous avons le soutien scolaire.
We have an after-school school help
40
homework kind
enfants
of
chez nous
program.
chaque jour.
So, Carol?
Oui.
We've got about 40 kids that come to us every day for help with schoolwork, educational
Dans
help.
le quartier, il y a des enfants qui ne vont pas à l'école.
In our area, there are lots of kids who don't go to school.
Et ça nous a fait commencer une petite maternelle cette année.
Because of that, we started a little preschool this year.
Et nous voulons dire merci à Guy au FJ Suisse qui nous ont aidés à remplacer notre vieille voiture.
And we
Un
want to
pick-up.
thank the King's
allez
Kids
voir
in
la
Switzerland who helped us to replace our old car.
Je laisse la place à Tamou.
And now I will hand over to Tamu, who's... So Tamu is the other region, the East West Africa.
Voilà, vous êtes maintenant actuellement dans notre région.
So you're in our region at the moment.
Donc si on peut me donner la carte. Notre région, c'est 8 pays.
We have 8 countries in our region.
Dans 5 pays, on a... Voilà. Bienvenue dans notre région, bienvenue en Afrique.
Welcome to Africa.
Voilà, donc notre région, c'est ce pays-là.
So it's these 8 countries that are our region.
Et les places où vous voyez les jaunes là, ça c'est là où on a les King's Kids.
The 5 yellow spots are where we have functioning King's Kids ministries at the moment.
Et là où vous voyez les rouges là, ça c'est là où on n'a pas encore les fabricants de
So in Liberia, Guinea and Senegal, the red dots are where we don't have King's Kids ministries at
Et
present.
notre grand défi, c'est avoir les FJ dans ces 3 pays.
And so one of our big challenges is how to see the ministry birthed in these 3 nations.
En Gambie, on a le ministère qui commence très bien.
We've got the ministry beginning well in Gambia
Et parce que l'actuel responsable de James est un ancien responsable FJ.
because the current YWAM leader in Gambia is one of our former kids.
Donc, on a un responsable qui veut partir maintenant au Brésil pour se former avec l'école FTJ.
And we have a leader who's going to be going to do PCYM in Brazil.
Et donc, ça, c'est un sujet de prière.
So you could pray for that.
Un deuxième sujet de prière, c'est au niveau de la Guinée-Conakry.
In Guinea, not Guinea-Bissau, but Guinea-Conakry,
Nous prions pour ce pays.
we pray for this country.
Dieu nous a envoyé 3 personnes qui travaillent avec les enfants,
God has sent us 3 people who work with kids there,
mais ils sont tous rentrés l'an passé à cause de la maladie.
but they all left and had to go home last year because of sickness.
Et puis hier, il y a Elio qui me disait, Andresa, elle a un problème de cancer même au ventre.
And I heard just yesterday that one of these people has stomach cancer.
Donc Andresa, on a besoin de prier pour elle. Dans 15 jours, Après, elle doit passer voir le docteur.
So we have to pray for her. Her name is
Andressa.
Andressa.
Voilà. Ce sont nos grands défis au Mali.
In Mali,
Voilà, vous voyez notre grand défi aujourd'hui, ce sont les nouvelles du jour.
the big challenge at the moment is what you're hearing in the news, the political
On a beaucoup
situation.
d'enfants déplacés.
We've got lots of kids who've been displaced.
Et tout dernièrement, ils m'ont fait appel pour que je puisse aider ces enfants-là.
And recently we were asked to help with some of these kids.
Je pense au Mali, les gens pensent que je suis le spécialiste des enfants, alors que dans ces cas, je ne sais pas faire grand-chose avec ces enfants.
Some people in Mali think I'm the big specialist about working with children, but in that sort of situation, I feel at a loss. I feel like I don't know what to do.
Mais ils regardent à nous.
But they look to us.
L'Église regarde à nous.
The church looks to us.
Et même les non-chrétiens, ils savent que nous faisons ce travail.
And even non-Christians know that we do what we do.
Nous avons besoin de prières.
And so we really need your
Et
prayers.
pas seulement de prières, on a besoin des gens qui viennent, des spécialistes. Venez nous aider.
And not just your prayers, we need people to come and to work with us. Come.
Parce qu'on a eu plus de 250 000 Maliens déplacés.
Because more than 250,000 Malians have been displaced as a result of the war, the unrest that's going on.
On a commencé des petits travaux avec eux, mais
So
ça
we've
suffit pas.
begun a few small initiatives with them, but there's a
Notre
lot to be
deuxième
done.
défi au Mali,
Our second challenge in Mali,
Jeunesse en mission a payé un terrain d'à peu près un demi-hectare, un peu moins.
YWAM now has a new plot of land.
Ils ont donné une place pour les FJ, un demi,
Okay,
presque, à
half
peu
a
près un demi,
hectare of
un peu moins. quoi.
ground.
Voilà. Ils nous ont donné une place pour les FJ.
So they've given part of that to us for the King's Kids Ministry.
Et nous sommes en train de prier pour avoir un centre FJ.
And so we're praying about building some kind of centre,
Donc c'est à
ministry
peu près,
centre
c'est à
there.
peu près un plan de
So
ce
this is
centre.
kind of a sketch of a plan that we've made of the sort of thing we'd like to
C'est beaucoup
see.
de millions pour nous.
Many millions, and it's a lot of
À
money
peu
for
près
us.
108 millions.
It will be
108.
okay, about 108
580 million
CFA.
CFA, yes.
Yeah.
Mais
Lots of millions of
voilà, Dieu va
CFA.
nous aider.
But we know that God will help us.
Mais pour nous, c'est très important que Jeunesse en Mission décide qu'il donne une place.
But for us, it was extremely significant that YWAM was willing to dedicate part of that property to us for the ministry.
En Guinée-Bissau,
In Guinea-Bissau,
ce qui est très important,
also important,
Binance et son équipe n'arrivent plus à bien répondre aux besoins des églises pour la formation des enfants.
similarly, Binas and his team, Binas over there, and his team are not able to respond to all the invitations that they get from churches.
Nous bénissons le Seigneur pour le travail qu'il fait.
We bless the Lord for the work that these guys are doing.
Au Sénégal, vous avez entendu le cri de cœur d'Albert et toute son équipe.
You heard Albert, the national YWAM leader here in Senegal, share his heart, the longing to see the Fabricants de Joie start up again in this nation.
Et vous avez aussi entendu le cri de cœur de Gary.
And you also heard what Gary shared with us this morning.
Nous avons besoin de transformation.
We need transformation.
Et vous êtes ceux que Dieu a appelés pour nous aider.
And you are among those that the Lord has called to help us.
On va terminer par une série d'images que vous allez voir. Et
We're
puis,
going to
voilà,
show
je
a
vais
few
pas vous
pictures
prendre
just to
plus
give you
de
a
temps.
taste as we finish.
In the YWAM region, this is part of the Middle East and North Africa. But we have King's Kids in Egypt with Nevin. Medhat is still active there, but we don't know really the connection. And we need to clarify a little bit that. Jihad, tell us a little bit about Sudan. In 2 minutes.
Okay. King's Kids started with Aboud in Sudan. He did his PCYM with Vero, yes. But now Sudan was divided. He needed to move down to South Sudan. But there is still a good team in the north. And Aboud is really struggling financially at the moment in what's the capital down in South? No, South Sudan. Juba it's very expensive, and he's still struggling to have his own house for his family. So, but he's starting work there, still in the beginning of it.
Thank you.
So there's still in the north and in the south.
The newest nation of the earth.
Yes.
After we have King's Kids in East Africa, this is the region here. At this point, we are trying for the last 2 or 3 years to build a leadership team for the region, but it's quite difficult. We've been there to help them, we had a regional meeting, I'm going there again in September. But I think the most developed ministry is in Tanzania, with Vero Odanga. I was looking for her new name. Vero Odanga, who will be in Switzerland for 3 months to help Babs to staff the PCYM in Willer and get some training by the same way. And they have a lot of staff actually in their base in Arusha, close to the Kilimanjaro. And after we have King's Kids in Kenya, we have in 2 places in Mombasa with Eric and Janelle. Bob and Elizabeth worked also in Mombasa, but at this point they just left the base and start something outside the base. And we have also in Athi River, close to Nairobi, another Y1 base where there are some King's Kids activities. We have Uganda with Dixon and Mabel Wesonga, and they have some King's Kids activities, I would say traditional during the year, but one of the main involvement is for them to be involved in a Y1 ministry called Foster Family Network. And Eleazar, you were sharing yesterday about the 8 orphans, and this is what Y1 in Uganda is doing. They are welcoming, I think it's about 150 orphans in about 20 families, most of them being Y1 families, and helping them to go to school, to be in a family setting, because the statistics and the studies show that for a child to grow in a family, even if he's an orphan, is far more effective and can produce transformation than to put him in an orphanage. It's completely different. And I think this is a vision that has the potential to transform all these nations that have a big challenge with orphans and AIDS. So this is something we want to support and encourage. We had King's Kids in Rwanda with Arnold and Winnie Vermeulen, but I think they just left a few months ago. I don't have the last news. Do some of you?
I've got a newsletter saying they were still in the Netherlands.
They are in the
That was
Netherlands.
just before Christmas.
Okay. Yes. Now we have a few people in this region that we call Central Africa. For this, at this season, we don't have at all any leadership structure, and we don't see some strong national leaders that is emerging so we can work together. It's still a pioneering stage. But there is King's Kids in some place of RDC, in Republic of Congo, especially in the eastern part, where they had some trouble and political difficulties these last few years. Some people did PCYM in Rwanda or in Kenya and went there to start some work with the kids. We had King's Kids starting in Gabon with the wife of the YWAM leader. It's an amazing person, and she's actually working with deaf children, and she's the most gifted lady in the whole country to communicate with deaf, and she is recognized by the government. So she has lots of open doors with deaf children and disabled in the nation. And we have King's Kids in Cameroon. This is one of the nations where we need to solve some difficulties. Gary could speak to us about that, as he tried to do that for some weeks, even months, last year or 2 years ago. We'll speak about that later. But we have King's Kids in several places, and it's kind of traditional King's Kids group meeting once a month and doing some Easter camp and outreaches. And then we have King's Kids also in the southern part of Africa. We have King's Kids in South Africa with a couple, Ad and Karen Schooiwater. They are Dutch. but they live in South Africa for many years, and they have a team, a King's Kids team in Durban, and we also have King's Kids in Madagascar, in Antananarivo, with, you know, maybe Tahiri and Eve, who have been leading the ministry for some years now, and now they are moving in another ministry, and younger leaders are taking the place. Their vision is to spread in different spots of the nation, but the leadership team is still very weak, so we advise them to wait and not to go too quickly, so they can be strengthened. But they have really a heart for God, and there are tremendous open doors to reach the children in this nation. Joel was there in October. So this is the situation at this point. This is where we are, and we need to strengthen that. And I would say we even need to enlarge that. As we spoke last year in our ILT in Jordan, we want King's Kids to go deep. And this is what we are doing with the traditional model of King's Kids and following kids for 20 years maybe until they reach adulthood and they are trained with a Christian mind and they can get involved in society or come into mission or church ministry. That's great. But when we look at the task, we should also have a wider vision and develop lots of new models of King's Kids ministry to care for the poor, to reach out for the unchurched, and to disciple and to train the churches so we can partner with lots of others and communicate our King's Kids principles. This is one thing God was sharing with us. Do not keep the treasures I have given you in prison. Do not keep them for yourself. You need to pass them on to others so you can partner, because the task is so big. So we need not only to have a vision for the deep, but we also need a vision for the wide. And for that we need to develop partnerships and new ways of doing things so we can reach many also. So this is a little bit where we are. Dale, would you like to share something? I see you coming, and normally this is not without a purpose.
I think Harry and Anka and the rest of us, we're recognizing as a ministry family that you can see from our new theme, Generations Living the Kingdom, that we are challenged to not only have programs and activities which are very helpful, but to really grapple with what it takes to deal with, as we've been talking about, the inequalities that are happening economically and socially, dealing with the unrest, instabilities that are happening, and also dealing with the whole issue of sustainability of development. And what we realize is that God's answer is so obvious, sometimes we miss it, but it's our challenge of living the kingdom, bringing it down, so that we are not just giving somebody an opportunity to start a program somewhere, but we're really helping them to establish a sustainable way of living. We could call it community, we could call it a team, but it's having the DNA of the kingdom so that it is rooted and livable, and that our people are able to share and serve others out of the fullness of their cup, rather than the few drops we can squeeze out. And that's our challenge, is to really understand, what does that look like in Africa? How do we help our people to really live in a sustainable, transformational way? And we realize that before we can help others to do that, we have to learn to do that ourselves. That includes economic issues, as we were talking about yesterday. And when we look at situations like Tamu and others who have really grappled with this, not just running some programs, which are important, but really his own family and, establishing something that can be built around in a rooted, unshakable way. And when we look at the families that we're talking about and others, this is something we're really grappling with right now. And as a ministry, we were actually shaken by God quite strongly to say, you have a reputation for being alive, but actually it's not very alive. Wake up and grapple with the real core of how to live my kingdom. And in order to do that, you will not have all the answers. But you must open your eyes to others near you that can join you. And in a sense, it's about developing kingdom community that has the right relationships, the right foundations in how we live the kingdom, and out of that we serve others with the tools and the things that we have. And when you look at a continent that is built on tribalism, and at its heart, community life, if we do not bring a kingdom community life model in a clear way, I don't know how there can really be an establishing of the kingdom here. So as I hear these things, I'm so encouraged because of what God is challenging us to do. And I don't know if that sounds too theoretical or not, but you understand what I'm saying? And so our challenge is, when somebody wants to start something in Africa, our question isn't, have they done a PCYM somewhere? That's part of it. Our question isn't, do they know how to run a program? That's a part of it. But our question is, how do we help them to really be established in some way? Where if they're an individual, they're in team. If they're a married couple, their marriage is strong and their family is healthy. And that they are linked with others in their community, not only in YWAM, but with the local church and others, to really build something and establish something so that out of that can flow what can be multiplied. So I just wanted to point out the obvious, that God is challenging us to move in a direction that has great, great relevance in Africa. But the challenge is actually much harder than multiplying our best programs. Our challenge is really to bring the kingdom down in Africa in a way that will transform, not just some, but transform in a way that's multipliable and sustainable in how the kingdom of God will come.